order. We'll take the items up in the order that they appear on the agenda. Start with item number 1.
Item number 1 is a General Services Department report relative to authority to release a request for proposal to procure the professional services of an independent monitoring organization in connection with the city's sweat-free ordinance.
Thank you very much. My first question is, do you have an expected release date for the RFP?
We almost ready to release that, and I assume we can probably within a month.
Can you pull the mic a little closer?
Sure.
Again, your name, please?
My name is Farshid Yazdi from General Services.
Okay.
We are ready to release the RFP within a month.
Okay. And then when it comes to scoring of the RFP, have we figured out the criteria for the scoring?
There are details, criteria for evaluation on pages, I believe, 14, 15 of the RFP. Yes.
Okay. And the cost for membership, the membership level that we're participating in is $500?
For the initial entry-level membership for the first year, yes. After that, it's not for sure.
Oh, okay. So that's the first year level, okay.
That's correct.
Now, what benefit does the city potentially receive from this membership?
The main benefit that I can see is for the city to be on board of directors, to start serving on the board of directors and help in the process of forming the consortium in a way to ensure the best interest of the city is being considered.
Okay. So, and what are the source of the $500 fee? Where's the money coming from? What source of funds?
John Trigotta with General Services. We'll absorb that within the General Services budget, the general fund.
Okay. I know your budget's tight, but you think
absolutely.
you can be able to
I think we can do $500. Yeah.
And it is rendering a service consistent with how we would like to procure items, correct?
Yes. And the $50,000 that we're setting aside for the monitoring contract is existing budgeted funds as well.
Okay, thank you. What resources has the department used when it comes to trying so far to make sure that we adhere to a sweat-free program within the city?
Well, we did have the contract in place with independent monitoring contractors, Worker Rights Consortium, which was a DC-based company. That contract was expired end of November. However, after November, they still had some deliverables that they needed to complete, and they continued providing services for several months after the expiration of the contract. On top of that, we have our advisory, sweat-free advisory group, comprised of city members and also advocacy groups. And that group meets on a monthly basis, and we have been using.
Thank you. Do you have any questions on the item 1, the sweat-free thing?
I know it was absent for a while, or it was suspended, or whatever you want to say. The program formed in 2003, and then we were involved in it. There were some concerns about being involved in it. So now we're involved in it?
Well,
sounds like it's bounced back and forth.
Okay, I think what you're referring to is the Nationwide Consortium. Initially, there were some logistics concerns, some legalities, potential conflicts with the charter and the admin code, and most importantly, some cost concerns that Department of General Services did not feel comfortable coming to your committee and recommending that we join at that time. Those costs have been alleviated.
That was the $50,000 fee?
No, sir. It was a sliding cost based on population, if I recall correctly, and I don't recall exactly what the initial outlay was going to be for the city.
But much more than $500.
But much more than $500. We didn't see the benefit at the time. Since that time, the consortium redrafted their bylaws. They have met with Farshid throughout their process, taken his advice, and now have come up with this introductory price, if you will, to entice us to become a founding member.
But what do we get for the workers? What benefit is there?
Well, the initial benefit will be we'll be able to help shape the organization on a go-forward basis. So we'll be sitting with the other members of the consortium and drafting their bylaws or shaping their bylaws on a go-forward basis. We will be leveraging their resources. We will have information from databases on other violators that we're not aware of, and these are things that we can take into consideration when we're entering into contracts for the procurement of goods and services.
But is the Labor Department involved in this at all?
Labor Department, no,
Labor
it's I don't believe Labor Department.
This is a private enterprise.
The consortium is a group of government entities and nonprofits.
Non-profits, yes. It's a non-profit organization.
And the concern is that we don't deal with, and I understand that, with the sweatshops when it comes to purchasing items.
Okay, so...
Aren't there federal laws and labor laws dealing with those?
Within the United States, yes, but this is reaching out to areas like Cambodia, Mexico, South America, Africa, looking into the rights of those workers who are providing items to us through our existing contracts.
Sounds like a tour.
No, thank you.
Okay,
I'll take their word for it.
thank you. All right, that's good.
Thank you. We have some public comment cards on item number 1. First, we have Young Soon Park and Joanne Lowe. I'll call you up 2 at a time.
Good afternoon. My name is Young Sun Park. I'm a staff attorney with the Asian Pacific American Legal Center. We've been involved with enforcement of this ordinance as part of the advisory committee since its inception. And I'd like to speak specifically to the RFP for the independent monitor. Our understanding is that there has not been a contract in place since November of 2009. So it's been over a year since we haven't had a monitor to actually enforce and investigate the working conditions of all of the goods that are procured by the city. And so we'd like to reiterate our concern about that, and we fully support the recommendations that have just been communicated by the GSD representatives. We also support joining of the consortium, but I know that others will want to speak more specifically to that. I sat here and spoke before the committee a little over 2 years ago in support of the consortium, and we do believe that it will assist us to leverage the resources that we have for greater ultimate enforcement of the law. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Joanne?
Hi. I'm Joanne Lowe. I'm Executive Director of the Food Chain Workers Alliance. We're a national coalition of unions and worker centers organizing to improve wages and working conditions in the food system. And I'm also an advocate member of the City of LA's Sweat-Free Advisory Group. And so I'm here also to speak in support of the city joining the Sweat-Free Purchasing Consortium. We believe that membership in the consortium will help the city to fulfill its enforcement of the sweat-free purchasing ordinance. The consortium currently has 3 states and 10 cities as its members, including the states of New York, Maine, and Pennsylvania, and the cities of Seattle, Portland, and Berkeley. The consortium will allow its members to share information about vendors and factories. As was mentioned, the consortium is currently developing a database, so the city could research this database as it's considering bids from vendors to find out which vendors and factories are compliant with sweat-free ordinances around the country. The consortium will potentially coordinate investigations and monitoring of factories, which would save members costs, and also coordinate the sharing of best practices between members. So we really see that joining the Sweat-Free Purchasing Consortium in the long run could be the most efficient and effective use of our resources and to ensure that our taxpayer money isn't used to support sweatshops. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Maya Barron.
Hi, my name is Maya Barron. I'm with the Los Angeles office of the Progressive Jewish Alliance and Jewish Funds for Justice. And as an organization, we've been a member of the Sweat-Free Advisory Group also since its inception I just wanted to speak to the fact that several years ago, Los Angeles passing the sweat-free procurement ordinance really put us out as a leader in this anti-sweatshop movement, and so many cities then followed with similar ordinances. And so it's just in keeping with that tradition that we joined the National Sweat-Free Purchasing Consortium, and step into that leadership role once again. I also want to emphasize that in terms of the broader impact, it's been mentioned, but the fact that having multiple cities and entities gathered together will dramatically increase our effectiveness to impact change in factories abroad, where, you know, their contracts with the city of LA might be small, but with all of these cities combined would be large enough to actually make an impact and change the conditions. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public comment. That concludes the public comment cards that have been filled out for item number 1. Is there anybody else here who wishes to speak on item number 1? Seeing and hearing no one come forward on item number 1, public comment on item number 1 is now closed. So with that, without objection, we'll adopt the GSD report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We go now to item number 2.
Item number 2 is motion Rosendahl-Koretz relative to the Chief Legislative Analyst to facilitate the formation of a working group with appropriate departments and report on the necessary steps to redevelop the West Los Angeles Municipal Building.
Okay, we have Whitney Blumenfeld from Council District 11. You have the floor.
Good morning, council members. I am just here to ask if we could amend the motion because it mentions that we have affordable senior housing on site when in fact we just have a senior center.
Oh.
And we would like to have affordable
So it's
housing.
not saying it's not affordable. It's not officially considered categorically affordable senior housing.
It's actually no housing on site currently.
Oh, really?
Just a senior
I thought senior center.
Yes, senior center.
All right. Okay.
We would like to have affordable housing though.
Okay. That's on your wish list.
Yes.
All right. Okay. All right. Any questions from the
Move the
committee?
item.
Okay. Move the item as amended and corrected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One quick question. We don't have to currently talk about which departments we'd like involved.
Sure.
No.
Which departments would
We
those
don't?
be?
Okay, sure. BOE, Library, LAHD, SD, Rec and Parks, LADOT, someone from Planning as well. It will be a CD11 staff member and a West LA Neighborhood Council member, just for the record.
Okay. So those departments and offices will be involved in the discussions and on the further steps taken on this item.
Correct. Thank you very
Have
much.
Have you obtained any funding source?
No,
So you have no funding for it?
correct. We perhaps may be able to use money from the West Los Angeles TIMP. Previously, there have been some discussions about a private-public partnership, and that's maybe where we'll be headed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, good luck when identifying resources.
Thank you. We'll need it.
With that, we'll adopt item number 2 as amended, the motion on item number 2 as amended. Okay. Next, we go to item number 3.
Item number 3 is a CLA report relative to funding for San Fernando Valley Council of Governments annual dues and adoption of procedure to appoint alternate SFVCOG members.
Good afternoon, John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. Before you is a recommendation concerning payment of dues and the appointment of alternates to the San Fernando Valley COG. Council joined this organization last year, and they have been going through the formation steps over the last year or so. Each city is required to pay dues to the organization as well as adopt a policy regarding its appointment of alternates to the COG board, and so this just sets that all in place. In this case, alternates would be the chief of the staff or the staff members of the council members who sit on the COG board.
I have a question.
They're right there.
I know, I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
Councilmember Zine had a brilliant idea, and since we've exercised it, we've been able to get all of our membership, well, I wouldn't say all, I haven't verified all, but most of the membership organizations where the City of Los Angeles pays dues. Councilmember Zine had made a motion, I think it was a couple of years ago, that we exercise the opportunity to ask each one of those organizations if they would agree to discount our membership by 10%. I'm not sure if that was taken into account when we arrived at this amount on this item.
The problem, this is new, and
So maybe for next year's renewal, we'll ask them for a 10%.
This is the first time we've done this, but ICA and contract cities and all the others, they were giving reduced rates because of the economy.
Yeah.
But since this is new, that's why I think it would not impact what we try it next year.
I know this board had some discussions about actually raising the dues because there were concerns that the rate was low, considering they hired an executive director, et cetera, and the board determined to not raise the rates at all.
How many cities are involved in this?
Six.
San Fernando, Santa
Glendale,
Glendale, Burbank.
Los Angeles, 5 cities in the county.
That's $50,000 right there.
Yeah, $60,000.
How about the city just outside your district on the 101? They're not involved? Calabasas isn't involved?
They are not a member, no.
So, if you're looking at, and I know Mr. Scott, and he's the champion of this for many years, we've got to, I think it would be negative if we started asking for increase when some of the cities aren't doing real well with the tax base. Are they all at 10 grand?
They are all at 10 grand. Every member pays an equal amount.
'Cause, you got
At
some
the
cities-
first?
Well, if it was ratio, then we'd be paying a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah. So this is a bargain for the city of Los Angeles.
well, what do we pay for the south and the west cog?
The West Side Cities COG is, I believe, $20,000 to $25,000
South?
per city, and that's equal to all members. South Bay Cities, I would have to check on that one. That one's proportional based on population, so we bear a much higher rate in that COG than we do in the others.
Because when you look at ICA, contract cities, National League of Cities, California League of Cities, the
Yeah.
COGs, we were maybe approaching 10 different entities,
Easily, yeah.
and we're spending a lot of money,
Exactly.
$200,000 maybe, or $150,000.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah.
Just the League of Cities is, I think it's way more than 200,000.
Yeah, and there's SCAG as well, so.
Yeah.
SCAG, yeah, I mean, so we're spending an entire fortune, plus the staff, because your staff and the other staff that are involved. So
Exactly.
we start adding that up, it's a considerable chunk of change.
Yeah. And just for your
Get a
information.
plaque when we pay our dues?
What's that?
Do we at least get like a plaque or a certificate when we pay our dues?
A membership card?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that and Mr. Cardenas is right, we did make that motion to reduce contracts at independent cities. I don't know if California League of Cities did it, but you were involved, I was involved in that.
Yeah.
And then there's the expense when you travel to the different venues when they have events. So if we start analyzing the dollars that are going out, like some cities are pulling back on a lot of the different extension of activities.
Yes.
Well, the good thing about this one is this is a rarity when the city of LA is not being asked to give a disproportionate share compared to other cities. So it's nice to see that smaller cities have as much stake in the game as we do. And we have equal vote too, so
Yeah.
per member. Okay, so that being the case, that was the only question I had. Any more questions?
No.
Okay. We are on item number 3. I do not see any public comment cards on item number 3. Is there anybody here to speak on item number 3? Seeing and hearing no one come forward on item number 3. Public comment on item number 3 is now closed. With that, we'll adopt the CLA report. It's been adopted. We'll now move to item number 4.
Item number 4 is motion Zine Smith directing the Department of General Services to report on the feasibility and mechanisms for the city to accept and/or utilize various vehicles identified by the federal government and requesting the city attorney to report on the capacity in which these vehicles can be used by the city attorney's office.
All right. I'm a little skeptical. So my first question is, why would the FBI or the DEA be involved in handing over vehicles to the city of LA? What kind of vehicles are they? Why are they doing this? And how does that benefit the city?
Good afternoon, William Carter, Chief Deputy City Attorney's Office. For 14 years, I was a federal prosecutor. I worked for the Department of Justice. I'm very familiar with how federal agencies work. I know I worked with one of your colleagues, Adam Schiff. He and I were both in the...
Congressman now.
Yes. Adam
Former
Schiff,
legislator, now congressman.
he and I were both in the public corruption section together in the U.S. Attorney's Office. So our background, at least the new administration in the City Attorney's Office, are all former federal or state prosecutors. We have a very close relationship with the federal agencies. The FBI commonly provides equipment to local law enforcement, and we see ourselves as law enforcement in the City Attorney's Office. Certainly one half of our shop is. City Attorney's Office is trying to save money and be as efficiently as and act as efficiently as possible. We have a fleet of vehicles that have been provided and are maintained by GSD. They do a great job doing that. Unfortunately, these cars are not the best cars to use for certain types of law enforcement efforts, such as sub rosa surveillance or investigation, certainly in workers' compensation, or trying to surveil someone that is doing something. When you have a city vehicle with city plates, exempt plates, or has a city seal on it, or has a permit on it as a hybrid, you draw suspicion. So what we have done is we've reached out to the FBI and the DEA, and they have provided assurances, and we have a written contract. We're provided to enter into that contract. The FBI will provide at any given time 5 vehicles. These are 5 vehicles that they use for surveillance purposes. They're both U.S. and foreign made. They are safe vehicles. They will be certified by the FBI. They will be provided to us at no charge. We will not get title. However, we can swap those out on a rotating basis. If anything goes wrong with the car, we can turn it into the FBI, because they maintain a fleet of vehicles over here in Westwood.
Oh, cool. So while we're utilizing the vehicles, I like the idea of any responsible agency or organization to help us in any way possible, whether it's helping us with vehicles or doing, working with their personnel and cooperating to improve our responsibilities. But the main questions that come to my mind is, when we're using these vehicles, whose responsibility is to maintain them, keep them fueled, and all that stuff?
The city will have responsibilities. Well, there's two approaches we have. We have 2 options. One is the DEA option. The DEA will give us cars, clear title. They would just give us the cars. And you can have those cars. They're the same kind of cars that you would suspect that they get in drug seizures or other kinds of, some new, some not new. That's one option, and there is a proposed amendment to the motion, and that would be the DEA option, where they would give us straight out title to the vehicles, and the city would take those vehicles like they would any other car. We would maintain them. The FBI option is a revolving option, where they would allow us to go down to their fleet. We'd pick out 5 cars, and then we would be able to use those cars. And if one of the cars, once we brought those in, we would turn in whatever vehicles we have. If we had 5 GSD vehicles, we would turn those GSD vehicles into GSD, and then GSD would associate those numbers to the FBI cars. Those cars would have, the city would fuel them just like they would our cars. They would do routine maintenance on them just like they would do our cars, and windshield wipers and the like, oil change. However, if there was any substantial maintenance, drivetrain, we would just have the FBI come, tow those cars out, and they're responsible for the repair or to give us a new car.
So basically what you're describing for us is I guess we'll speak first to the FBI. They're loaning us the use of the vehicles. They keep title. And when it comes to the basic maintenance, like you said, minor things like whether it's gassing it up and making sure it's got proper oil and fluids and all that. However, they understand that if something goes clunk on the car and dollar signs start to leave our wallets, if we're going to address that issue, that they accept the fact that we call them up and then they retrieve the vehicle, and then they will either replace it with another vehicle or we don't get another vehicle based on our choice at that moment.
We would not have a net benefit of cars. If we had 10 cars now, we would give 5 of our GSD cars in and take 5 FBR cars.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a revolving number of 5 cars.
Mm-hmm.
And what GSD would do is what they're doing the same with our GSD cars. So there'd be no net increase to the city. The only real substantial cost that I could see, the substantial cost that we would save is if those cars break down.
Mm-hmm.
The Jiffy Lube type maintenance would still be maintained by...
Which we would do on our own cars.
On our own cars. If there's a transmission, if there's a drivetrain, if there's anything wrong with the engine, FBI pulls it out pursuant to our agreement. They either give us a new car or they fix the one we like.
Has the FBI lent us these vehicles like this before?
Not the city, no. Not this city, no.
Okay. Any thing that you would like to give me, a policymaker, an awareness of, other than what has already been said? On the FBI vehicles, it sounds pretty cool if they're going to, anything beyond basic maintenance that they'll take care of. And also, the city attorney's office would not be increasing the number of vehicles assigned to them as a whole. So in other words, it doesn't sound like your department would be getting a higher burden that you would have to figure out how to add your responsibilities to be able to keep up with that higher burden. It sounds like a burden that's pretty equal based on the way it stands right now on the FBI vehicles.
Angela Sherrick-Bright, Department of General Services. First of all, we'd like to start off by saying that we are not saying that the city attorney's office does not need these vehicles. We're just saying that with respect...
That's a policy decision.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So with respect to them having the vehicles, our concern are the maintenance that's involved with having them. Also with the utilization report that you have asked us to complete and the number of vehicles that are actually in the fleet. So in addition to any vehicles that the city attorney's office was on loan from the FBI, the city attorney's office would still have to give up the number of vehicles that are identified in the utilization report. And again, with respects to maintenance, while we're saying that it's routine maintenance, the utilization report that we just completed shows that General Services is down 30 to 40 positions. So any type of maintenance that's on a vehicle that is not already in our fleet is something that we would have to be concerned about. So those are pretty much the concerns that we have.
So for example, say the FBI allows us to use certain vehicles that are Model X or what have you. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have those models already in our fleet. So what you're saying is that's a nuance that maybe some people might not think is a big deal, but when you look at mechanics and the infrastructure that we have right now, we should be cognizant of what we're taking on. Not that it's a bad idea to take on these vehicles, but just be cognizant of that. For example, they might have a vehicle that comes to mind that is very exotic, a Hummer, right? You're doing surveillance, trying to look like a drug dealer, maybe you have a Hummer with shiny rims or what have you. Maybe that's one of the vehicles. Do we have any Hummers in the fleet right now? Probably not.
Yes, we do.
No, that's his private vehicle.
We do have a Hummer.
Oh, we do? Okay. Who maintains that Hummer?
Not in GSD.
That's LAPD.
LAPD. Correct. Yeah, see, we're talking GSD.
Same thing.
I thought you were talking about Jaime de la Vega's Hummer. That's his private vehicle. So those are the nuances. I'm not going to second guess personally the city attorney's office as to how valuable these vehicles potentially could be for their operations or what have you. As far as I'm concerned, if the city attorney feels that those vehicles are a complement to his ability to get their ability to get things done, I'm fine with that as a policymaker. I just want to make sure that we're not accidentally causing burdens or consternation on either the city attorney's office or any other department whenever we look at a gift. Because when it's a gift, all of a sudden we say, great. But unfortunately, there are liabilities, responsibilities, et cetera, that go with it.
And that one other thing I'd like to mention also is generally when GSD is responsible for any vehicle, we always do an inspection on that vehicle prior to prior to it becoming something that we maintain, even routine maintenance. So the scenario that has been presented says that basically those vehicles are rotated out whenever there's a new operation, and so that's a concern for us also. That we would need to look at those vehicles and make sure that they are something that is safe, because that's our number one priority whenever we have a city employee driving it, and also that it's not just a junker.
These are not exotic cars. They're pretty standard. Some may be Tahoes, some may be Chevy Impalas, some may be all relatively new. Nissans, Toyotas, Hondas. They're nothing exotic. They're the same kind of vehicle you would see in your standard rental fleet. So, and the FBI will certify them, but we also understand and we do appreciate there would have to be some intake inspection. But in terms of the liability, the FBI has agreed, and in the draft contract we have, they will accept all liability for these cars, anything that happens with these cars.
Well,
Or happens to a city employee in that car?
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I mean,
They
you're the
do
city
that quite
attorney's
often.
office. You would be advising us as to whether how holistic that liability that they would be assuming is. So you're saying that, as you understand, when it comes to the FBI, because we haven't got to the DEA yet,
Yes.
FBI, they're pretty holistic about understanding those responsibilities and putting them in writing and attesting to that and protecting us of that.
Yes, we have a draft contract. We're waiting for the resolution of this matter. The DEA is a different story. The DEA would just give us title. And I think the quality of the cars would probably be different with the DEA.
and just
Our preference is the FBI. That's the pattern. That's the model we're looking at.
Just a comment on that with regards to, I believe that the memorandum of understanding actually talked about negligence, so that if the city employee who's driving the car is negligent, that the city would have to take on the liability. So I just don't want anyone to think that the liability would be all of the FBI's. So if there was an accident and someone was hurt or maimed or killed, the city would take on that that's my recognition.
Which would be the case in any
Right.
negligent activity from a city employee in any vehicle or on foot or what have you, whether in
Correct.
uniform or on the job.
Correct.
All right. So, well, thank you for clarifying that. So we're still back to what's the differences of the FBI. Now, what is the timing of the FBI opportunity here and the DEA opportunity? And I still have some questions about the DEA because it is a different
Immediately.
relationship.
We worked out an arrangement with the DEA and the FBI over a year ago. They're prepared to do it at a moment's notice. We could go there tomorrow and pick out a car or cars. The DEA is prepared to deliver 7 cars to us today. It would be immediate.
And
I can't speak for GSD as to the timing on that.
I'm looking at the Zion Greg Smith motion. It's dated April 20th. When did we solidify from the city attorney's office that you liked the idea? Was it 2 years ago, earlier this year? I mean, I just want to get a perspective on how long
We first started discussing this issue back in '09, within a few months of us coming into office. And the reason we started looking at this was because of workers' compensation and the need to do more investigations for fraud. And so when you look at what was available to us to follow individuals around to see if they were injured or not, or other types of surveillance, we just did not have the vehicles to do that in an effective way. The only other option we had was to hire outside contract investigating agencies at a higher price because they had the fleet vehicles that could do this kind of surveillance. So given the fact that our chief of our Bureau of Investigations is also a former law enforcement officer over 30 years, we have close contacts with the FBI and DEA. He knew that they had fleet vehicles, and these fleet vehicles are just parked over in Westwood and other areas, and an idea was born from there. And at that point, the DEA and the FBI were more than happy to partner with us.
Yeah. My last question is, now the DEA vehicles, those are a little bit different, and I would say a little bit less complicated, because I would assume that on those, we would inspect them, see whether or not they're acceptable and they're thumbs up and they're good enough for us to utilize as part of our fleet. So there are going to be two processes should we go forward with the DEA and the FBI. The one thing that I want to make sure that we embed in this, should it go forward, is to make sure that without too much burden on either the city attorney's office or GSD, to make sure that we somehow try to figure out if we can standardize this kind of effort in understanding the benefits and the burdens that this pretty cool opportunity brings to us. It's kind of like having kids, you know. I mean, they're wonderful and joyful, and there's nothing better than that, but the thing is, with it comes a lot of responsibilities. So as having my son just graduated yesterday at 17 and a half years. I do my part too. I'm a modern husband. Go ahead, Dennis.
I was saying his wife raises the children, not him.
Give it up to her.
The police department has a hold harmless program. Would this be similar to that program?
I'm not familiar with their program.
Okay, you may want to contact them, their LAPD Fleet Services, because they have an arrangement with the FBI, U.S. Marshal, where they have hold harmless vehicles. They've got a lot of joint task forces between LAPD and the federal agencies, and they've been doing that for a long time. They also have arrangements with certain car dealers where they will donate cars for law enforcement operations. And the thing I like about this with the city attorney's office, there's no cost to the city. There's a lot of asset forfeiture that takes place with the federal law enforcement. I'm sure some of those are asset forfeiture cars, which the individuals who've been arrested surrender those cars, and then they have a glut of cars. They got to do something with them other than send them to the auction. But the program has been in existence for a long time with the PD, with the hold harmless through car dealers, no cost to the city. They basically do the oil change, give the gasoline, anything else goes back to the dealer. But the program's been in existence for a long time. So maybe GSD, because of the different operations where they're mostly city cars, city personnel, this is a different approach, but it does save the city money as far as purchasing cars, which I don't think we're doing right now, and it gives them the equipment they need to do their job. The process would continue indefinitely, and I know we did the motion. We have, if I could read this into the record, the council accepted donation by the DEA, starting with the first group of 7 vehicles, donation by the FBI, the revolving use of several FBI vehicles for use by city attorney is further described in the text of the motion, and that the Department of General Services be instructed to record the donated equipment on the department's inventory list, and that the city attorney thank the donators on behalf of the city. So I think it's a cost savings program, a unique program, new to the city attorney, but not new to the city of Los Angeles, since law enforcement has used it for a number of years.
The difference, I agree with all those points, but there's one thing that's missing is when you look at the police department, they're already familiar with this. They've embedded it into their system. They've embedded it into their cost, their annual costs, and they've embedded it into their maintenance crews, et cetera. But GSD, unlike the police department, has taken much higher percentage cuts in their mechanics, et cetera. So the thing is, I want to be sensitive to GSD taking on this responsibility, unless the city attorney's office is going to contract with the police department, and then those guys and gals who maintain those vehicles that they get from Marshal's office and FBI and all that stuff. That's my only concern. I don't want to do what we as policymakers, including myself, have done on occasion before times got tough like this. We ask the department to do something, they take a big gulp, and say, okay, they're the policymakers, we'll just try to figure out how to make this happen. Those days are gone, because just the amount of flexibility and the amount of personnel that they have has just drastically been reduced, especially when it comes to vehicle maintenance. So has the city attorney's office considered or explored whether or not you can partner with the police department on the aspect of the maintenance of these vehicles?
No, we currently have 1 or 2 vehicles that the FBI provides to the city attorney's office. The city attorney has a vehicle, and that's the only one that they maintain for us.
The police department?
Police department.
Cool. All right.
But our thought was that there would be no net increase over time for the costs that are currently being incurred by the 5 vehicles or 7 vehicles we would give away. Now, there might be an initial cost for an inspection, but we thought that would be a rather small cost. But we thought really as a one-to-one, apples and apples, that there wouldn't be a net increase of maintenance costs.
So the number of vehicles, you're not going to increase the fleet.
In fact,
If you got 5, you're going to have 5. You got 10, you're going to have 10. You're not going to go any higher.
Our fleet has decreased. We've actually turned in probably at least 10 cars, I think, in the last year. Our fleet has actually gone down.
Down a bit.
And I think most everyone's fleet, but we certainly are not net increase of our cars, and we don't think the cost will increase. I think it'll just be a neutral. But the LAPD does maintain one of our vehicles. That's the city attorney's.
I don't mean to sound biased toward LAPD, but with all due respect, they have done a much better job of defending their budget and keeping their budget better and intact than GSD has. And I happen to know through being the chairman of this committee how drastically GSD's been impacted on their ability, especially with ERIP. We lost some of our most experienced, diverse mechanics. And with that, we've lost a lot of capacity. And thank God we're reducing our fleets, and we'll continue to do so. We have reports coming back showing us how we can do more and more and more if every department is going to cooperate. So that's my main concern. Again, policy-wise, I like the idea, and I agree with the city attorney that if he wants that diversity and ability to be more impactful on certain kinds of cases, and these vehicles will assist, I agree with the policy of it. The only thing that I'm concerned is how much are we burdening a particular department, and are they going to be burdened? Probably not going to complain, but still, I don't want their silence to be, deemed as they're not being burdened. So, Dennis, you got any recommendations on how we could approach the police department and see if they can?
They're short of personnel also, but I do remember that during some recent budget talks, we did give General Services additional dollars along with another department. So I don't know where you are as far as personnel and budget, but there were additional dollars.
This current fiscal year, the fleet was cut by $2.9 million. The year we're in right now, our fleet was cut along.
$2.9 million were cut out of your fleet maintenance /
That's correct.
fleet budget.
Is that gasoline and oil or maintenance?
Gasoline, $2.3 million.
Yeah, it was
Apart
cut.
from the 2.9.
Correct.
So you're going to be pedaling around then?
I'm sorry?
You're going to be pedaling around like a bicycle if you don't have.
That's next month's recommendation.
Yeah. No, I think that between the general services, and I know that the fire department's maxed out with their mechanics, the police department, everybody seems to have the same situation with ERIP, and the senior people are gone, and the budgetary crunch, which hits us all. But we start with GSD, and whatever arrangements can be done with GSD, and then any assistance from the police department. You deal with them, I assume.
The police department?
Yes.
Yes.
They're maintenance folks. And I think if we just give it to general services and have them work it out with the city attorney and see if the PD can assist in some manner.
I can tell you this from my experience, some of the hybrids that we are driving have extraordinary maintenance costs. I'm not sure who's paying for those, but some of the people in our fleets have been sidelined because of the hybrids that have been the Toyotas, the older ones.
Well, the ones with 100,000 miles, which I just turned in because the battery finally died, I think the battery's $2,000 or something for the hybrid battery.
I mean, we can
They're
get rid
gonna
of
scrap
those.
the car.
And those are the ones that.
So what you're expressing is maybe or hopefully you'll be able to switch out some of your older, higher maintenance vehicles with this opportunity from
salvage them.
One or two of these agencies to replace those.
Yes.
I mean, that's a good note. But
Some of those cars are 10 years old, I think.
The hybrids we have are probably 2002, 2003.
How long could it or would it take for GSD to communicate in detail with the city attorney's office so that you can let us know? I mean, I would love to hear this in 2 weeks and then hear you guys say, well, we figured out all the little bugs and details and and I think that we both know what we're getting into, and we can handle it, and we're okay.
I think 2 weeks is ample.
That work for you?
We can do it,
Okay.
yes.
So we'll bring it back in the committee in 2 weeks, and we'll get a report back from both of your departments on how this is going to fit, hopefully hand in glove. Again, allowing your department, the city attorney's office, to have more flexibility on enforcing the kinds of cases you need to enforce with these vehicles, give you that flexibility, and also GSD understanding what they're getting into and accepting the responsibility on their part. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good. Okay, so we'll hear this item in 2 weeks in this committee. And is there anybody, that was item number 4. We have item number 4, public comment, Antonia Ramirez.
Good afternoon. I have serious concerns about the City Attorney's Office in regards to ethical and accountability dilemmas that are severely compromised in that enforcement aspect of the city. However, that's not to say that the FBI is any more efficient and trustworthy, because they are not. I have serious doubts that the City Attorney's Office will not accurately report on the capacity in which the vehicles could be used by the City Attorney's Office, wasting funds and or keeping false records, which they have been known to do. The LA City Attorney's Office needs an overseer for checks and balances and more for accountability. God knows they need it. Furthermore, we see the unsafe status of LA, and primarily in East LA. Nothing has been done to curtail the gangbangers and the criminal illegal aliens. However, I conclude I do not trust the LA City Attorney's record keeping, thereby leaving LA residents, including military veterans, their families, law-abiding citizens like myself, pilots, in an unsafe and precarious situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ramirez, hold on a second. I'm going to move this item to the agenda when we reconvene in 2 weeks on this committee.
Okay.
Okay, that's item number 4 that you just spoke on. Since you filled out a public comment card on general public comment?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually filled out 2. One?
Yes, this is the second one. I'm going to open up general public comment at this time.
Okay.
So you have 2 more minutes to speak on general public comment.
Thank you. One moment, please. Thank you. Again, this is a matter of principle. I am pleased to acknowledge 2 outstanding great political leaders and who will be celebrating their birthdays. One is the Honorable ex-mayor of Anaheim, Kurt Pringle, whose birthday is on June 27th. He is the youngest political giant of the 21st century who allowed First Amendment liberties, transcends racism, brought freedom-friendliness attitudes into Anaheim, and thus tourism took a breath of the world. And he streamlined his genius government projects to be simplified and accessed by the general public in a structured and methodical manner. He is the most brilliant master of government and political affairs in the 9th, and is the 9th wonder of the world. The second great icon is mi ex-presidente Vicente Fox de la República Mexicana, and the 8th wonder of the world. He espoused freedom of expression, religious liberties, elegance, astuteness, and educating others to take the helm in the global world. And he will celebrate his birthday on July the 2nd. So happy birthday to both these wonderful, great icons, mi ex-presidente Vicente Fox and ex-mayor of Anaheim, Kurt Pringle, who also speaks wonderful Spanish. And I would like to get in touch with my Gillespie daredevil pilot extraordinaire from Gillespie Airfield, the greatest pilots in the world, who also maybe will fly their happy birthday banners. But just to let you know, I admire, as a Mexican American, I am not envious of anyone. I admire and I love to learn from the most brilliant, the most challenging, the most super mega individuals like Kurt Pringle and Vicente Fox. I'm always scouting for great people, and I'm also willing to expose the corrupted. Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Ethics Commission wanted to interview.
General public comment, which means items that are not on the agenda, and I don't think those items are ever going to show up on this agenda, on this committee. So that being the case, anybody else for general public comment? Seeing and hearing none, general public comment is now closed. We now move to item number 5.
6.
I'm sorry, 6.
Five.
No, 5.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's me. I did it wrong. Duh. Item number 5 is motion Zine Parks Garcetti instructing the city administrative officer and the Ethics Commission to work in conjunction with the Department of General Services to review and reform the policy governing home garaging of city-owned automotive equipment specific to the city's motor pool fleet to ensure tighter controls to prevent further abuse of city resources, and instructing the Department of General Services to work with top city departments that are frequent users of the city's motor pool resources in order to report on a uniform policy to enforce adequate use.
GSD? Can you briefly describe what it means to have a motor pool vehicle and a home garage vehicle? The difference between the two? I mean,
Terry Sauer with the CAO staff. I'll handle the home garaging part because that's covered by CAO Rule 5, and then I'll defer to GSD on the motor pool. CAO Rule 5 sets out the criteria for home garage vehicles. Typically, that's the general managers and the elected officials and the staff of elected officials, and there are some other criteria, public safety related items. Typically, what we have right now with the executive fleet, the only cars with home garaging authority are the council staff, the mayor's staff, and the general managers of the city departments who don't elect to receive a vehicle, a car allowance. Sorry, my brain is not working today. We review those requests. We make sure that those people who have home garaging authority are have the appropriate insurance requirements. And once we've determined that all those criteria are met, we send an approval letter back to the individual, back to the council office, back to GSD, authorizing the home garaging. We review those on a regular basis, but those are very limited. There are a very limited number of vehicles that fall in the home garaging. There is a temporary home garaging form. If someone, for example, is working late and the city encourages carpooling, it's part of the ride sharing that would allow an employee to take a vehicle home overnight. There is a procedure for that where it's signed by a department head, but that's not really administered by our office. In terms of the use of the fleet, the criteria for that and what's appropriate is set by GSD.
So, Angela Sherrick-Bright, GSD. In talking about the motor pool, basically the motor pool is for any city employee, and it's a daily use of vehicles. As Terry pointed out, there are some instances when a person would need to take a vehicle home overnight, and GSD does have the authority to approve that. Through CAO Rule Number 5, GSD also has the authority to approve a little bit of a longer-term checkout, 30 days and then an additional 30 days. So generally the motor pool is used for a daily use, and in some instances there is an allowance to check it out for longer, and GSD does give the approval for that.
No, I know that this was prompted by some media reports of misuse of city vehicles and some representatives from municipal government. One of the issues was taking a city vehicle to go to lunch. I don't really see a problem with the city employee going to lunch. And if there's a restriction, taking the city car to go to lunch. So can you, maybe Ethics Commission, comment on that?
Good afternoon. Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission. The Governmental Ethics Ordinance does not specifically address the city fleet. The law that's on the books that prohibits the personal use of city vehicles is not one of the laws that we govern. However, we do have a sort of tangentially related law that goes to the use of city resources in general and misusing city authority in order to obtain a private benefit. So we have had some conversations about whether there should be something more specific in terms of what is and what is not permissible, and whether that should be housed in the governmental ethics ordinance as opposed to the CAO Rule 5. So we're very happy to talk with GSD and the CAO's office to see how best to move forward with this.
Yes, because oftentimes, like when someone retires, there'll be a retirement luncheon, and you see a number of individuals from that particular office use city cars, and they go to the luncheon, bid farewell, and then they come back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they're not consuming alcohol while they're doing that. That one of the reports was that city employees going to lunch in a city pool vehicle, and then one was a city employee who had a take-home vehicle, letting her husband use that vehicle to drive the children to work. And obviously that's a violation. Would that be the ethics rules, or would it be governing under the rule?
It falls squarely within the law that's not within the Ethics Commission's jurisdiction, but it would probably also invoke one of our laws that doesn't speak specifically to a city fleet or a city vehicle, but does talk about city resources and city authority in general.
So when a city employee gets a vehicle, a take-home vehicle, are they given any set of instructions, documented, this is what you can and can't do?
Yes, Mr. Stein, when a city employee, when we send out our approval of the home garage vehicle, in addition to the cover letter which authorizes that individual to have a take-home vehicle, we provide a copy of the Ethics Commission guidelines. We provide a copy of an employee relations bulletin that has in the past addressed the use of city vehicles. We also provide a cover letter from GSD and also regulations in terms of paying for the parking fees associated with that vehicle. So they are given a template and guidelines in terms of what are considered appropriate uses, with particular attention being given to the Ethics Commission bulletin.
Do we ever do any audits to find out if they're complying?
In terms of the CAO does once a year, typically once a year, we have not done it for this year yet, send out a letter asking all the users to resubmit their requests, to resubmit the forms and update their insurance requirements. In terms of going out and actually making sure that typically would be handled on a complaint basis. We haven't gotten any of those, and that's really not, we don't have the enforcement capability in that case.
So I know coming from the police department, as a supervisor, we would do that. Someone who had a take-home vehicle, we would actually go to the residence and verify that it was where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, no,
to keep it on right track.
The CAO does not do that. And typically,
there's really no audit process in place. Unless you get a complaint. If you get a complaint, then
it's the position of our office that once we review it to determine that it meets the criteria for home garaging, then it would be up to the specific office or department head, if there's a home garaging situation within a department, to monitor that. So therefore, it would rest within the purview of the council office to monitor to make sure that their employees are using their home garage vehicles in accordance with the city guidelines.
But ethics wouldn't get involved in that, though.
If we were to receive a whistleblower complaint or it somehow came to our attention, we would certainly look at it to see if it fell within one of the laws that we are charged with enforcing. And I know the city attorney's office is the department that enforces the code section 63.106, which is the specific language about using city vehicles for personal use. I don't know whether they have any independent auditing functions associated with that.
Because it seems embarrassing when we see a media report which describes this and everybody says how it's being outrageously abused, and I'm sure it's not abused as often, but when there is abuse and it becomes a media story, it starts having people ask questions. So somehow I think we need to strengthen something other than a document to say this is what you should do or not do without any follow-up. Kind of like photo red light. If there's no follow-up, it doesn't really have a lot of impact. Oh, I'm sorry. We already debated that one for 2 hours. Can we get, I think we need to tighten it up, and it seems to be rather loose right now.
Well, sometimes things need to be tightened up, sometimes understanding of what is already in place needs to be adhered to as well, or understood better. For example, what is the difference between a city worker utilizing a city vehicle and then they actually drive to lunch? Is that allowed or not? Because that was one of the things that the cameras approached somebody about and made it seem like they're on city time, it's the middle of the day, it's the middle of the workday, and they go somewhere for lunch in a city vehicle. Is that allowed or not?
Again, from the CAO's perspective, that would fall, if it's a pool vehicle, that falls under GSD, and I would have to defer to GSD in terms of how that's enforced.
And if it were a home garage vehicle?
If it's a home garage vehicle, typically the bulk of the home garage vehicles are used as part of the executive fleet, used by field staff. There are broader parameters as it relates to using those vehicles, but again, we would counsel caution based on the ethics guidelines. There are a number of examples given in the ethics guidelines that talk about, can you pick up your dry cleaning on the way home, and no, can you use the vehicle to take your kid to school?
But hold on a second. Picking up dry cleaning on the way home, to me, seems a grayer area than it's 9 to 5, I'm in a city vehicle, I'm a city employee, I have a home garage vehicle, and I got to eat, and I do legally have an opportunity to have my lunch. So drive over to a restaurant, have lunch, get back in the vehicle, and continue my other duties and responsibilities.
I think that situation, and I would defer to ethics on this, is slightly different from the situation that was reported in the paper where it was a pool vehicle that had been checked out and then taken to lunch. I think if it's in the course of regular duty, and again, I'm not the city attorney, nor am I the ethics commission, and that does fall into a gray area, and I would defer to both for...
Okay, so a pool vehicle, the scenario, it's the middle of the day, middle of the workday, working during the day, have the right to take a lunch break, have a pool vehicle, go to lunch at a specific place, get back into the vehicle, continue my work.
I think your question goes right to why we need to rework the rules and look at them and make sure that employees understand what is required of them, because they are gray areas. What we generally say at General Services is that once we check the vehicle out, because there is an authorized signature from a department, that department is responsible for what their employee does once they check that vehicle out. And I know it sounds like I'm saying I'm pushing the responsibility off to someone else, but the way the rules read, there's an ethics commission part of it, there's a CAO part of it, there's a GSD part of it, and there's a city attorney part of it, because part of the rules are in the municipal code, and the city attorney is the enforcement authority for that. So I do understand
So right now, in the scenario that I just gave on a pool vehicle, is that individual violating their responsibilities?
And what we would do in that instance is we would pull out the trip card and we would talk to the department and ask them, did you allow this employee to check the car out, and is this your department policy to allow that? Because every department is different. Basically what we would look at is that they have an authorized signature from their department head or whoever has the ability or the authority to do that, and we would ask the department.
So there is no consistency.
Correct.
Yes.
City ethics.
Yes.
Same scenario, pool car. Somebody whistleblows on that individual with a pool car. What do you do?
We have the same situation of having to go case by case to determine whether they had been authorized by their department to do this. And if they had been, there would be a strong argument that they were using city resources appropriately. So
you're going to retire, and a whole bunch of general service people want to go to your retirement luncheon at the Proud Bird near LAX. That's a nice place for retirement luncheons. I've been there for a number of them. And they go out and they get some pool cars because they want a carpool, and they go out there with 4 pool cars. They're parked in the lot. They go celebrate, and they come back to work and check the cars back in. Typical situation. And someone would say that's a misappropriate but then the general manager says, you know what, I supported that. So there is no consistency. You say it's gray, it's really how I feel today. It's okay today, but they don't like you, so they're not going to let them go in the pool car, take the bus. You know, I mean, it's just, we got to have some kind of basic rules. And I think it's just very loose. And, you know, not that you're going to fire people for this, but I don't think they understand the rules, because I don't think we understand the rules, because I think they're just, you know, general manager says yes, or general manager says no, and okay, well, we'll forget about it. Not that you're retiring, but I'm just trying to get an example. So I think we need to come up with something, maybe between the different entities that are here, and come up with something that would make sense, and then we could publish that.
We have a fleet utilization study that's coming before us soon. Is this matter being addressed in that fleet utilization study at all, or is this adjunct to that?
Adjunct to that.
Okay. Does it make any sense for us to try to get a report back on this aspect of fleet usage with that fleet utilization report, or is it really?
I think that the fleet utilization report should be separate from this issue, because so many departments are involved in actually writing the policy. And the fleet utilization study was specific to GSD working with individual departments on their usage.
Okay. Now, it's your motion, Dennis.
So I'd like to have them come back and get a draft of something between the three working together, and I think that since you've dealt with this.
City Attorney's Office.
City Attorney's Office. Because ethics has the rules, and then there's a violation, and the whistleblower, because obviously people are going to blow whistles, and then we can't ignore it. We've got to do something about it. But at least we have a set of rules that say this is what you can or can't do. For example, you're coming back from the retirement party, and they're all drinking six-packs in the back seat of the pool car. I mean, that obviously doesn't look right, but the driver's not intoxicated. Designated driver, and everybody else is getting smashed.
Open container.
Open container in a car. So, I mean, I don't want to overburden, but I think we need to have something, because we keep on hearing it's too gray. And if you have too gray, then nothing gets done. And then if someone does something, then there's consequences. Like the DWP employees who went to the strip club in the DWP truck, and then they went and got the beer and drank it. I mean, obviously that's blatant, but that was shown on television, so obviously Water and Power has to deal with that. But we need to have some kind of basic common sense rules. I know coming from the police department, it's very strict. You do this, there's consequences. You get disciplined, you get challenged, you get fired, and that's it. But you got to have something to fall back on. So I think we should have them come back and work on
CLA, CAO, GSD, City Attorney, City Ethics.
You know what we need, so I think they can put their heads together and get it done.
So basically, report back to this committee on this motion on recommendations of better clarity of how the city should handle these matters. Right now, it looks like there's some latitude, department by department, but there's certainly no department has the latitude of allowing people to have blatant violations of containers in cars and things of that nature.
You'd hope not.
But maybe it requires clarity. Maybe we actually delineate more clearly what cannot be done and should not be done while utilizing the city vehicle.
There was a police officer, not LAPD, but a police officer recently took a marked car to Vegas. They drove to Vegas. They got caught and got fired. But, you know, like when you leave there should be something that says if you leave the county, you've got to notify somebody.
Yeah,
the police department has that.
There are requirements, I believe, that you can't leave, that.
You have that?
That you can't leave the county, or that if you have to park it at the closest facility at the county line. I think that's currently the process, and that.
Or you have a letter ahead of time notifying and allowing you to do so.
For a pool car, if you have a letter ahead of time, if you're going out of town, it has to be approved.
And a home garage vehicle?
I believe. I
think home garage vehicle.
It's the county line.
I believe actually there was a motion in 1982 that was adopted that permits elected officials to take city vehicles without getting prior permission within the SCAG counties. So that would be San Diego, Imperial, LA, Orange, San Bernardino. Outside of those counties, prior permission is required.
But who gives that permission?
I believe it's the city council would get that.
Permission or letter of notice? Two different things.
It is two different things, and I don't know the distinction there.
I think it's authorization, just like when you're going to take off, you get approved by the council. You know, you request to be excused for this or that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So if we could have that back and,
Yeah, report back, but, I mean, you're all busy, and there are a lot of moving parts. Each one of your departments has distinct responsibilities. I mean,
So
how much
give-
time would you need to report back? 30
give a
days,
couple-
45, 60 days?
60?
60 days?
that's reasonable.
Right. To solve an age-old problem? Piece of cake.
At least we have something to fall back on, that we can say this is the rule and you violated the rule.
Well, they're going to bring us with ideas. Now we have to make the tough decisions of what,
Well, at least we have some more ideas.
how and what to adopt.
A lot of ambiguity right now.
Changes, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So report back in 60 days on this item.
Great.
Thank you from
Thank you.
those departments as named.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are no public comment cards on item number 5, so that being the case, we'll move on to item number 6. Thank you all.
Item number 6 is an Information Technology Agency report in response to motion Labange Garcetti relative to the feasibility of maintaining the current 311 call center hours of operation. And those are from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. following a reduction of 8 filled positions to occur on July 1st, 2011 as part of the adopted fiscal year 2011-12 budget.
Could you clarify for the record again, what are the current operations of the 311 operating hours?
Good afternoon, council members. Mark Wolf with ITA. With me is Agnes Lung-Tam. She's the director for 311. Our current hours of operation are from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
All right, and did we budget you for that? In the coming fiscal year?
For the upcoming fiscal year, there's a reduction in 8 filled positions that will be eliminated July 1st. And as part of the adopted budget, it recommended that the operating hours be changed from 8 a.m. to 4:45 p.m. The actual call center will close operations by 5 p.m. During the last 15 minutes of operations, they will complete the calls that are in the queue.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's not much of a 311.
It started with 24 hours though, didn't it?
It initially began as a 24-hour service, a 24/7 operation, and with the new budget, it's proposed to be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., 7 days a week.
Okay, so have you folks done a survey, peaks and valleys? Like, you get calls at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, or you get them on weekends? Have you surveyed your peak loads?
We have, Councilman. The majority of the calls, 80% of the calls that we receive are between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. So the other 20% span between 5 p.m. to 7 a.m.
So after midnight, is there any activity after midnight?
There are definitely calls that do come in, and today what we've done is, with the reduction of staffing that was implemented this current fiscal year, we changed the operations from 24/7 to the current hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And what we've done is we put in place a interactive voice response system, a phone-based menu system, where for the top services that are ones where there are more critical city services, where there are city staff still in place after operating normal business hours, the public is able to select those items and be transferred to a live operator. So an example of that is for Ask LAPD services, they can transfer, and there's a few other services that we have set up that way, like water and power, if there's an emergency relating to water and power services.
So do you have a system where they can leave a message? For example, they want to report something that's not 24-hour operation. Is there a capacity to leave a message about whatever the case may be, and then someone gets back to them, or not?
The system has that capability. We have not set it up that way thus far. The current message that goes into place with this IVR options that goes in place after 10 p.m. Currently, it does not allow the capability of leaving a message. It indicates that the call center is closed. and it specifies the hours that it's closed from. And in addition to that, it says if it's one of the critical services, you can select one of the following options, and it gives those options. Otherwise, it says to please call back during business hours. And it also directs people to the website where they can also do self-service on some types of service types transactions, as well as email, which they then can submit to us, and we'll follow up the following day.
So Agnes, you're the one who has to deal with all this stuff.
Yes, sir.
Even though the hours have been cut, it's still a full-time job to manage a 311, right?
Yes, sir.
So I just wanted to get that out on the record, because some people say, well, geez, if you had it 24/7, and now you only have it several hours a day, why do you need a personnel person to be managing it? It's still a system that needs to be managed.
Right, yes.
Have you been there from the inception?
Actually, no. I've been here about 5-6 years.
5 or 6 years?
Mhm.
Well, quite some time for being on this system. Okay,
It's a great system. I've used it a lot. It's a great system. Like if I want to contact Councilman Cardenas, I call, ask for a supervisor, bam, they patch me through, like, Dan will patch me through the Wi-Fi. It's a great system. Then after 10 o'clock, just wait till the next day. So I don't know, with your 8 reduction, I don't know if there's anything we can do. I know Mr. LeBlanche wanted to keep it open.
Yeah, but we couldn't
7
fund it
to
at the
10.
level to keep it at those hours.
So I don't think that there's anything we can do unless we got more money for it.
Exactly.
And we've met with the councilman and his staff and briefed him on kind of our statistics, because what we're projecting is the current wait time right now for the average call, the caller calling into 311 is 2.5 minutes. We anticipate with the reduction of 8 additional staff that the average wait time will go to 4 minutes. And we're also experiencing today about 17% of the people just hang up. They either get tired of waiting or they don't want to wait. We expect that would jump to about 26%. So I guess the bottom line is, rather than degrade the overall services for the service experience for the callers and for the city, for the constituents, our recommendation was to modify the operating hours to preserve a reasonable wait time and still have the call experience be a good experience, rather than having people have excessively long wait times and, not be happy.
It's like you call 911 on the freeway. You wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you get an operator.
And the other thing that Agnes and I are both working on right now is looking at ways of bringing in additional technology solutions to help improve, to still be able to provide services during our non-hours of operation. So there's different phone-based technology solutions, as well as different internet web-based solutions that are usable for mobile devices and so forth. So we're evaluating different options right now, and what we plan to do is to come back in the fall during the next budget cycle to talk about some options that potentially the city consider to help improve or at least stabilize the services for 311.
Okay. Thank you. Leave it as it is.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that report. Anybody here to speak on item number 6? Public comment is open on item number 6. See no one come forward. Public comment on item number 6 is now closed. We'll note and file this report. That concludes the items on the agenda. We already had opened up general public comment earlier today, so that concludes our committee. We are now adjourned.